Okay, very good. Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you all. Of course, we would rather be in Slovenia. I had a chance over the years to have visit Slovenia, and it's just a beautiful country. I know Celje and Ljubljana, Bled, Portorož. So anyway, we look forward to hopefully next year when we all as a community can be with each other in person. Well, in keeping with the theme of the conference in terms of digitization in economy, in digital transformation, and sustainable development, I'd like to talk about an area which I think has been omitted quite a bit in our community, and that's what I call intuition-based decision-making. So today I'm going to talk about how intuition plays a role in our big data, data-informed environment with big data and analytics. And my thesis is that you really need to have both complementary sets of skills to be a successful decision maker. So analytics plus intuition, in my view, will equal success. So I thought, since we had a wonderful slideshow, and to be a little bit nostalgic, you could see how Dean Shreko, Natick, and myself looked about 12 years ago at the International School for Social and Business Studies in Slovenia. I think Dean Natick still looks about the same, but I probably have aged a little bit. And then more recently, I had the chance to see Dusan down at a conference in Clearwater Beach, Florida, in 2018, before the pandemic, of course. And so you see a shot of us in our better halves. And then right before the pandemic, this is in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, at the airport. And I noticed that they had an interesting setup looking at, I'm pointing to the port of indecision. So since I do work in the decision-making area, I thought this was very appropriate. And we'll talk about during the next 40 minutes or so, how analytics and intuition play an important role in your decision-making capabilities. So before I get into talking about intuition, I have a quote by the Chief Technology Officer, the first Chief Technology Officer in the United States, Anish Chopra. And he said, when it comes to making major decisions, there are two camps. One consists of people who believe intuition is favored over analysis, so go with your gut. And the other rejects intuition in favor of careful data analysis. Where there is enough data, there is no need for intuition. But the ideal is a marriage of the two. So I also feel that we need a complementary set of both analytics and intuition. And as I mentioned before, I'll focus on the latter part as related to executive decision-making, which really hasn't been discussed much in the analytics community. So I know we have a session looking at big data as part of the conference. And I've been doing work in the analytics field for many years, but I guess it was since about 2012 when big data and analytics started to increase in interest, particularly even looking at academic publications. But the downside is that we still need more rigor behind the field, even though it's the analytics field. And there really hasn't been a business intelligence analytics conceptual framework for using analytics. So in some of my research, and also reaching out to about 11 international experts in analytics and did a Delphi survey, we came up with this conceptual framework. And it's essentially looking at the various business and IT drivers that will propel you into an analytics strategy. And there are certain business intelligence enablers that will help you get there. And then as you build out your analytics implementation roadmap, you have various success factors, criteria for success. So I know we have a number of doctoral students listening in. And if anyone is interested in the analytics area, even combined with knowledge management, you might try to validate this framework and see if it makes sense. Okay, so with that as a backdrop, I'd like to turn your attention to what I'm calling intuition-based decision-making. And just to show you that I'm not some crazy professor, a number of important people, particularly in the IT field, who are pretty analytical, you would think that they may not be as attuned to the importance of intuition, but you'd be wrong. So these are two quotes. The first is by Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, and he says that intuition is something that occurs in the moment, and if you're open to it, if you listen to it, it has the potential to direct or redirect you in a way that's best for you. And Jeff Bezos, who of course you know is the founder and now chairman of Amazon, even talks about how important it is for him to use his intuition. And he talks about that the most important decisions are always those that you use instinct and intuition and taste. So let me take you through a little journey. First, I'll set the stage because everyone may not be familiar with the work behind intuition applied in the management domain. So I'll try to preface and set the stage for you. Then I'll introduce some of the research that's been published in this area. And then the last third of my talk, I'll describe some of the research that I've been involved in with colleagues in Poland and Canada and Italy, and how we're extending some of that work, looking at how well do executives trust their intuition. Well, Professor Finkelstein is at the Tuck School at Dartmouth in the States, and he has this quote about the importance of moving fast and learning from your mistakes as a key part of executive decision-making. However, this might be difficult to do, and people often overestimate their ability to do it. So he wrote a book that's called Think Again, and it's a follow-up to one of his books called Why Smart Executives Fail. And he cites examples of major strategic decisions to explain why decision makers sometimes think they're right when they're actually wrong. Well, maybe when we look at intuition, Einstein is pretty analytical, said it best. The really valuable thing is intuition. And he actually had an even better quote, which I like, where he said that the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. So when we look at intuition, what are the key characteristics? And most people agree that these are the major factors when you consider your gut feeling or your intuitive awareness. The first is that it's typically experience driven. The second is that it's very holistic, so intuitive in that sense. It's affective, meaning that it's closely connected with emotions and feelings-based signals. It's quick, so you think quickly, it's primed for immediate action, and it's non-conscious, meaning that you can't easily map a logical audit trail, so to speak, to the judgment. So it's like knowing without knowing how one knows. I don't know if you recall Donald Rumsfeld, who used to be the US Secretary of Defense, but he had a quote similar to that. So just to show you that there's really value and research in what I'll be describing today, there have already been a number of books and handbooks looking at research methods on intuition. This is one volume that was published by Marta Sinclair from Griffith University in Australia. So how do you know if you're using your intuition as an executive or key decision maker? So Eugene Sadler Smith, who's with the University of Surrey in the UK, and he's one of the leading researchers in this area, he feels that these are the some of the key questions that the intuitive executive should be asking oneself. So let's see how these questions apply to you. So think about now, I think there are about 9 of them. Think about which ones really apply to you to see if you're an intuitive executive. So do you trust your hunches when confronted by an important decision? Do you feel in your body if a decision is right or wrong? Do you put a lot of faith in your initial feelings about people and situations? Or do you put more emphasis on feelings than data when you make a decision? So you can read through the rest. I'll give you about 15 seconds. And if you score between 7 and 9 as being positive, then maybe you're considered to be an intuitive decision maker, or at least on that way to being so. It would be interesting, I don't know, with the show of hands, using the reactions tab here. If anyone, did anyone score, let's say, between 7 to 9? Just to see if I'm dealing with a more intuitive audience. I don't know if you can raise your hand. Okay. All right, so let me now present some of the research that's been done in what I call intuition-based decision-making, and then I'll discuss some of my research. Oh, thank you. I see Dorsoff is, so you're an intuitive. Excellent. Okay, so let me present some of the work from the journals, and just to set the stage, and then I'll talk about some of my own research. So Dane and company had put together a study looking at trust your gut. There have been a number of different organizations. KPMG wrote a very nice report called The Trust Gap, where they actually looked at 2,200 executives in 10 countries, where they found that typically the executives would trust their intuition over data analysis. So Dane was also interested in looking at this area. And what they found is that intuition may be just as effective in decision-making as an analytical approach. There might be feedback, so if you're able to mute your mics, that would be great. And sometimes intuition might be more efficient and effective. So it depends on the level of expertise of the subject at hand. So if you're working in an industry where you've risen through the ranks, your domain expertise will likely better serve an intuitive approach. But if you gained your experience in a different field, you may not have the necessary background to rely strongly on your intuition. So for example, some companies might spread people too thin, but if you don't spend enough time in one domain, say you're moved from finance to marketing to R&D, you may become a well-rounded employee and understand the systems concept, which is good, but you may not obtain and have the necessary experience that you need for intuitive decision making. So just to play both sides of the argument, certainly intuition does have its disadvantages. And as this article points out, we generally have good intuition about things that are similar to what we encounter every day, but we have poor intuition about things that are outside our everyday experience, and very poor intuition about things that are totally alien. So for example, we probably know what a fair price is, or how long a task should take based on our experiences. But we probably have poor intuition in how to identify and react to the risks represented by a tsunami, though maybe I know we have those in Thailand and Indonesia, so you're probably better prepared than we are in the States. Or maybe we have poor intuition about things that are outside of all human experience, like quantum mechanics. So Peter Drucker, who you know is one of the fathers of management, he felt that you should not be a hunch artist. So believe in intuition only if you can discipline it. Well, just to hedge your bets, there are people like Haskett at Harvard, and they've talked about maybe using what we'll call rational intuition. I call it informed intuition, and maybe that's a good way to look at this. So here we look at intuition that's based on analysis and experience. And in the most difficult case of no time and high risk, reliance on rational intuition might be a preferred way to minimize collateral or direct damage if the decision goes wrong. So you're probably aware of people like Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote Blink, and he advised to place faith in intuition based on experience in deciding many things quickly. But then there are those like Michael Malpausson, who wrote Think Twice, and he suggests that we place too much emphasis on intuition and personal experience as opposed to wisdom of crowds, or maybe mathematical models, or systematically collected data. Well, I believe we need to educate informed intuitants. You won't find intuitant in the dictionary. I just made that up. And I point that out in a SAS Exchange column. So there is a group in the US called the Corporate Executive Board. Gartner bought them out. And Gartner, as you probably know, is a major IT and management research firm. And in their work, when they talked about analytics, they said that the key skills include problem solving, intellectual curiosity, issue diagnosis, insight generation, synthesis of internal and external data, problem framing, and synthesis of financial and qualitative data. But to truly be an informed intuitant, I feel that there are other skills that are also just as critical. And I show those here. So first of all, collaboration abilities, such as team building and project management and interpersonal communications. Creativity enhancing skills, again, to get you to think outside the box. Thirdly, to have the business speak summarization, and data visualization techniques for the analysts to explain their results to C-level executives. And then also learning by doing, or testing by learning methods to sharpen the analytical and decision-making skill sets. So I think as we have a number of students on the Makelearn Zoom today, I hope you'll think about rounding yourself out to include all these skill sets to really be a truly analytical and intuitive decision maker. Well, I saw some of the doctoral students. I know we have a number from Africa, and so I put this up for you all. I was looking at the technical journal research, and intuition does play a key role worldwide. This is just one example of reported research of small and medium-sized enterprises in Africa. There were over 300 managers and entrepreneurs at the SMEs that were surveyed, and they revealed that intuition certainly was a key resource for managerial decision-making. And I know there's a lot of interest in Slovenia, in Poland, in other countries regarding small and medium-sized businesses. So this might be an interesting, area to further explore. Okay, before I get into my own research, let me just finish up with some of the other work that's been done. And this was an interesting study by Lochner, more in the consumer marketing, consumer research area. And they reported a study where even people who think of themselves as data-driven decision makers also place trust in their own intuition. So they define a data-driven decision maker as someone who collects and analyzes data as much as possible before making a decision. So 73% of the executives surveyed said that they trust their own intuition when it comes to decision making. And even among the data-driven decision makers, 68% agreed with that statement. One of the reasons, if you're interested in wondering why many executives often rely on their intuitive awareness, is because they can't often trust the internal data quality in their organization. So if the data is questionable, it'd be difficult to rely on the analytics that are derived from the data. So that is one reason why many executives often rely on their experiential learning, which those in the knowledge management field, we feel very strongly about that. Okay, just a few more other bits of information on the research end. This is also from Dartmouth in the Journal of Consumer Research, and they showed that you can't rely on your intuition if you're given negative feedback. So what they did in one of their experiments is that the researchers gave false negative feedback to half the participants by telling them that they were wrong even when their answers to some questions were correct. And the subjects whose confidence had been disrupted by this negative feedback, they essentially lost the relative accuracy advantage from relying on their intuition. So again, there are pros and cons of using and relying on one's intuition. Well, among some of the most famous researchers in this area are Daniel Kahneman, who you probably know won a Nobel Prize in economics in 2002. There's a great book by Michael Lewis. Actually, Michael Lewis just came out with a new book a few weeks ago, Premonition, I think. But he has a great book looking at Daniel Kahneman called The Undoing Project. So he looks at Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, who are two of the leading scientists looking at heuristics and judgment. So anyway, Kahneman, and then Gary Klein is a leading cognitive psychologist. So as you could probably see on the screen, even though they may disagree, they each have some common ground as shown by these quotes. So in essence, they're both saying that you need to take your gut feeling as an important data point, but then you have to consciously and deliberately evaluate it. And if you're wondering what the pre-mortem technique is, as cited by Gary Klein, this is to say up front at the start of a project that a project has failed. So you say it at the beginning, and then you take 2 minutes and write down all the reasons why you think the project has failed. So as opposed to doing a post-mortem retrospective analysis, you do it in advance. Okay, so what can we do to improve our decision making from a business intuitive perspective? And these are some suggestions, and I'll give you a few others coming up. So first of all, recognize and respect your intuition. Don't follow it blindly or reject it outright. Try to identify what your intuition is telling you. So follow the hunch, ask, what is it? Review the evidence and play back the events to become more conscious of the signs, and then prove or disprove your theory. So gather additional information to consciously test your theory. Well, besides Sadler Smith, Kinsey, she has done some wonderful work also in the UK. The interesting part is that most of the research in intuition in the management domain has been done in Europe, but notably the UK and Australia. There hasn't been much in the US or North America in general. So if we want to improve this area of research, these are some suggestions for advancing the current state of the art. So again, we have to make sure that we're conceptually framing the problem correctly. This area lends itself beautifully to multidisciplinary talent. So as I'll describe some of my upcoming research, I worked with colleagues who were statisticians, strategy people, truth management folks, a neuroscientist, and I was kind of the business IT guy. So again, it really looks at this whole area lends itself very well to cross-disciplinary collaboration. We also have to make sure that we apply the methodological rigor, and again, pay close attention to the level of analysis. Okay, so how can you develop your intuitive awareness? So here are some possible guidelines to consider, and see if you already use some of these. So first, open up the closet. In other words, to what extent do you experience intuition, trust your feelings, count on intuitive judgments, maybe suppress hunches, or covertly rely upon your gut feel? Don't mix up your eyes, meaning instinct, insight, and intuition, they're not synonymous. So practice distinguishing between these three. Thirdly, elicit good feedback. So seek feedback on your intuitive judgments, build confidence in your gut feeling, and create a learning environment in which you can develop better intuitive awareness. Fourth, use imagery. So here, try to, in terms of, I forgot, getting a feeling for your batting average. So here, benchmark your intuitions, get a sense for how reliable your hunches are, and ask yourself, how could your intuitive judgment be improved? Okay, fifth is to use imagery. So again, we know in the data visualization area how important this is. Use imagery rather than words. Literally visualize potential future scenarios that take your gut feelings into account. Six, play devil's advocate. So test out your intuitive judgments, raise objections to them, generate counter arguments, probe how robust gut feel is when challenged, all the kinds of things we do as professors and researchers, as critical thinkers. And then capture and validate your intuitions. So create your inner state to give you intuitive mind the freedom to roam. Capture your creative intuitions, log them before they're censored by rational analysis. So here's I don't know how funny, but probably a true cartoon. For those might be hard to see. It says, your proposal is innovative. Unfortunately, we won't be able to use it because we've never tried something like this before. So this has happened a number of times in my professional life. Even right now, last night, we're trying to put in new windows in our house after 40 years. And the architectural review committee in the neighborhood is saying, this has never been done before in terms of what you want to do. And they want to stick with the old colonial style. So, you know, intuition breeds innovation. If you're only tied to statistics and analytics, you might miss new and better strategies or opportunities and methods for your business to be more efficient, effective, and successful. So try to use your informed intuition founded upon your years of business and experience and inspired by trends and big data, and navigate the future of your business. So now you have hopefully a decent understanding of what's been done in this area of what I'm calling intuition-based decision-making. And for the last part of my talk, I like to describe some of the recent research that I've been involved in, which combines both knowledge management and analytics. And by the way, we would be very interested in expanding our research to other countries. So if you're interested, please feel free to send me an email, and we would love to see how some of this fares across other countries beyond Italy, Poland, Canada, and the US. So if you are interested in this area, these are some books over the last few years that I've been involved in with colleagues. And again, unfortunately, in the analytics community, because we're so data-driven and data-informed, I think we're forgetting about the other half of our brain. And putting on my knowledge management experiential learning hat, I think we need to have a synergistic complementary set of skills. So, anyway, feel free to take a look at some of these sources. And actually, the book in the middle looks at a research track, what's been done to date, as well as a practice track, looking at key decision makers in government, industry, and even a college president on how they used intuition to help them make the right decision. So, so there's some, interesting work that's out there. Okay, so some of my recent work was based on a Fulbright research chair grant that I had at Queen's University in Canada. And I worked with colleagues from Canada and Italy and Poland. And we were interested in knowing how well do executives trust their intuition versus analysis and analytics. So there have been quite a few studies. The University of Cambridge along with Australia, KPMG. There have been studies over the past maybe 5 years that have showed that executives typically go with their intuition, partly based because they don't trust their internal quality. So we wanted to probe this a little more. And so we used an intuition scale, which was a validated instrument by Jean Pretz. She did her doctoral research at Yale looking at intuition. And we also used a trust management scale by a colleague, Joanna Palishkiewicz, who's at the Warsaw University of Life Sciences. And we surveyed 151 C-level executives in the US, Canada, Poland, and Italy. And we also did some biometrics work with 15 CEOs in Italy with my colleague in Rome to look at how well they listen to their body signals, which has proven to lead to improved intuition. So some of the results are shown here, and then I'll talk about our follow-on work from this past year. So just to set the stage, there are 4 main types of intuition. So the figure on your left shows that there is holistic BP, holistic big picture intuition, where you kind of see the forest for the trees. Holistic abstract intuition, which is a little more theoretically based. Affective intuition, which is emotions or feelings based. And inferential intuition, which is practices that have become so routine over time that you just do it, intuitively, instinctively. And then there was a trust score based on 9 dimensions. So the figure on your left shows that inferential and holistic big picture scored the highest, while affective and holistic abstract scores were lagging. We also found that holistic big picture intuition and inferential intuition were statistically significantly correlated. So generally speaking, the Europeans applied more affective intuition than the North Americans, and the North Americans scored higher on the 9 trust dimensions than the Europeans. We also looked at gender, and the figure on your right shows that the men scored or seemed to score higher across all types of intuition and trust. We had about 71% males and 29% females. We found that men had a statistically significantly higher holistic abstract intuition score than women. We also looked at comparisons across countries and within industry sectors. And what we found is that with each country, intuition was favored over analysis. And that was true with the gender comparisons as well. When we looked at industry sectors, we compared firms, for example, in the marketing industry to firms in all other industries. And we found that the non-marketing firms prefer analysis for decision-making approximately 10% more than the marketing firms, and we controlled for years of experience. So the marketing industry, for example, I think has recognized this limitation, and that's why there's been an increased push for customer analytics, which seems pretty apparent. We compared firms in manufacturing and engineering industries to firms in all other industries, and we found that firms in other industries prefer holistic abstract and holistic big picture intuition for decision-making more than the manufacturing and engineering firms. Again, we controlled for years of experience. And a number of you are in the IT field, and we found that firms in information technology, when compared with firms in all other industries, the non-IT firms preferred affective intuition, approximately 10% more than the IT firms. So essentially, we found that intuitive styles also varied over time based on your experience, as you might expect, going from affective intuition to inferential to holistic abstract to kind of the big picture. I'm looking at Dushan because I know Dushan has been presidents and also very high up in the ministry. So hopefully this will resonate with some of you. Okay, so let me describe our most recent research, and I want to be mindful of the time. So I think we'll have a good 10 or 12 minutes for Q&A afterwards. So this is as of 2021, one of my graduate assistants and myself, we expanded our international sample to now 245, mostly C-level executives. And we wanted to, get a larger sample than the 151. And we still, as I say, we'd love to grow this sample, compare it to, other countries than the ones we have. But when we expanded the sample to an additional 100 people, mainly executives, it shows that the respondents from the US and Canada had a higher score on the scales that correspond to the big picture modelers as compared to the respondents from Italy and Poland. And the left figure, the figure on your left, it shows us that the same respondents from the US and Canada had a lower score as compared with respondents from Poland and Italy on the scales that correspond to feeling theorists. So we coined two terms, the big picture modelers, people who would have a very high score in the holistic big picture area, and then the feeling theorists would be those who would have a higher score in affective intuition as well as holistic abstract intuition. The figure on your right shows that the less experienced respondents had high scores on the scales corresponding to feeling theorists, and the scores decreased as the experience increased. So the figure, however, shows us that the respondents with more experience are the top scores among the scales that correspond, as we would expect, to the big picture modelers. And even though our study is not dynamic, we would conclusively say from our responses that with more experience, there is a tendency to shift from displaying characteristics as being a feeling theorist to one of a big picture modeler, so gaining and using more intuitive awareness. Just to show you a few more visualizations, the figure on the right shows that whether the respondent is a male or female, it did not have or seem to have a significant impact on whether he or she prefers intuition or what we call rationality. So this could also be confirmed by examining the average rationality and intuition scores for males and females, and I'll show you those coming up. Both males and females had similar scores of rationalities, about 3.24 to 3.26 for male and female. And intuition, males had about 3.55 and females about 3.49. So let me just show you two more visualizations, and then I'll highlight the key findings. So the figure on the left shows that a significant number of respondents from the US, Canada, and Italy fall under this 45-degree line in the graph, showing that they prefer intuition over rationality. However, the majority of the respondents from Poland, for example, I know we have a colleague, at least one from Poland, fall closer to the 45-degree line or above, showing their preference for rationality over intuition. So this can also be verified from the results where Canada, Italy, and the US had high intuition scores compared to their respective rationality scores. So the figure on the right is trying to show that there is a high concentration of respondents with fewer than 10 years around the 45-degree line. And above that, this trend decreases as we move away from the graphs to the bottom of the graph. So it shows that those executives with at least 10 years of experience believe that their gut feelings when making strategic decisions, that they're using those more so than on their rationale. So just to finish off this current research, and I'll present the key findings. The figure on your left looks at industry sectors, and it shows that the majority of the points that lie close to the 45-degree line or above those belong to respondents who are in the financial, insurance, banking industry or government sector. And this reaffirms our common belief that people in the financial, insurance, banking industry would rely more on data instead of on their feelings. And if you look at the consulting, the professional service industry, or education, the field we're in, or even marketing, it shows that those executives from those industries trust more their gut feelings and intuition more so than the data. So I don't have time to go into all the numbers, but if you're interested, I can point you to an article that that will be published actually next month in Paris. So these are the key findings from all of our research. First is that your preference for different styles of intuition and analysis is dynamic. So as you would expect, as you gain more experience, your intuitive style will change over time. Executives tend to adopt a big picture modeler style than what we call this feeling theorist style. Thirdly, employee preferences for intuition styles change as they gain experience. However, what was interesting is that we found that some people might get stuck in one particular intuition style, which might separate them and prevent them from moving up the leadership ladder. And so, so that's an interesting area of research that we'd like to probe a little more. And then some of the other, in the interest of time, you could take a look at that. The last bullet I'll highlight, because this was based on hooking our 15 CEOs to EKG machines and looking at a controlled group. And it showed that they had a greater capability to develop what's called interoception than the age-matched control group in a way that could not be explained by chance alone. So certainly, we did find, looking at heartbeat detection scores, I know Moti from Israel is on the line, and he has a background in the biomedical informatics area, but it showed that those who believe, those who could listen more to their body signals had a higher intuitive awareness. And this has also been verified by other research studies. Okay, so just to wrap things up, there is some interesting work that's being done looking at the combination of this whole area. Jim Nelson, who's at Southern Illinois University, calls it hunch mining, and he's trying to combine intuition with analytics and AI in this whole cognitive computing space. I actually had a book that came out last fall called Data Analytics and AI, and Jim Nelson wrote the foreword in the book. So I think this is an area that's going to continue to grow. For those who maybe are more data driven, we put together an interesting article. It appeared in the Inform Analytics publication. You can just Google that. Looking at what are the key skill sets for business analytics professionals and data scientists. And we found there are 51 key skill sets across those two professions. And we categorize them by kind of people and soft skills, technical skills, and analytical skills. And there's even a spreadsheet model which will tell you if you have a greater propensity to be a business analytics professional or a data scientist or both. So you might find that to be of interest. And if you have problems sleeping at night, these are some books that came out within the past year that will help you sleep. So just to wrap things up, for those who are interested in this field of data analytics and even intuition, I've been involved with a book series called Data Analytics Applications. We now have 22 books that have been published across all different industry sectors by Taylor and Francis, so you can take a look to see what might be of interest to you. And then last month, I felt this whole area of digital transformation is so important. And so I was able to start a book series looking at digital transformation, accelerating organizational intelligence with World Scientific Publishing. They're the ones that publish the Nobel laureates speeches, and hopefully they'll do a good job. So if anyone is interested in putting together a book or edited book in this series, I've signed books with Wharton, the Center for Creative Leadership, the Institute for Digital Transformation, and then a colleague from Ottawa in China. So with that, I think I'll say Havala, thank you, and be happy to answer any questions or comments. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Liebowitz, for this interesting keynote speech. Now, if anyone has any questions or comments on the presentation and for the professor, just unmute your mic and turn on the camera and you can ask the questions or write them in chat.
And I do see some questions in the chat, so I'll try to get to those too.
Yeah.
It looks like, is it Tukas? Looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good morning. Thank you for the interesting speech. And I have one question. What the manager should do if his or her management style is data-driven, but there is no data? And should he or her wait for the right data or just based on the intuition?
Okay, thank you for your question. So it depends also on the situation. So as you know, intuition is often applied in times where there are crises or time pressure events, right? Because either you don't have all the data available or you don't have the time to collect, you know, and use that data. So that's when you often rely on your gut feeling. But to be truthful, for this, for this research, there are many other factors to look at. So how distracted is the decision maker? What is the mood of the decision maker at the time he or she makes a decision? There are, you know, a variety, you know, even time constraints. So, so in the US, I read a few years ago, President Biden, he wrote a book called, I think it's called Promise Me, Dad. And he talks about a situation with President Obama, where President Obama typically was characterized as being very cerebral, and he wanted all the data before making a decision. And I remember President Biden, who was the vice president at that time, said, look, in most of these situations, you'll have perhaps 70% of the data you need and available in the form you need it. So sometimes you got to draw a line and just go with your best feelings along with whatever data you have available. So the short answer is it depends. And, it depends on the time criticality of the situation, as well as, the quality of the data and some of these other parameters that might affect the decision maker, at that time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I see there is one question in the chat about the relationship between intuition and risk management. And actually, one of the new books in the digital transformation series coming out is on strategic risk management by Eduardo Rodriguez, who used to teach at University of Ottawa, and now he's in China at Wenzhou Keen University. So certainly there are parallels, and I know I do work in the knowledge management field as well, and there's also a convergence looking at knowledge management, project management, and risk management. So again, it depends on your level of comfort as a risk taker. Are you risk averse? Are you a risk seeker? And again, it depends on the importance of the decision that needs to be made. So, so in the US, we're a very litigious society. We probably have more lawyers than most countries. But so again, if something were to go awry and you made a decision based on your gut feeling, even though you felt that was the right decision, if the data presented, in a post ad hoc analysis shows differently, well, that could also lead to certain issues. So I just wanted to make it clear that I'm not favoring one, analytics or intuition. I'm just saying that please don't exclude or discount your experiential learning and intuition when you make decisions. Combine it with whatever data, and hopefully it's good data that you can get your hands on. Let's see, I'm just seeing if there are other questions, or you can feel free to, let's see, is it Professor Dokali? Yeah.
I have a question. First, thank you for the wonderful and I would say timely speech, very inspiring. Did you identify in your research like a structured or reliable means of intuition management, or maybe a means to harvest collective intuition?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. When you say a structure, what do you mean?
Well, intuition can be pretty wild. So is there a way to make it more structured, more manageable, more refined, or maybe to include more people in these intuition gathering exercises?
That's an excellent point. As I mentioned in the presentation, there are different intuitive styles, and some people, not only based on their experience, but their personality and just their intelligence, might favor one intuitive style over another as you gain more experience. I mean, what we found is that most people, starting out rely a little more on their affective intuition, and then it progresses to more of the inferential. There's certain routines that you learn that become immersed within how you think, and then it leads up to holistic abstract and holistic big picture intuition. So there's some interesting work. We haven't done it, but Sinla Akinsey, she's at the University of St. Andrews now in the UK, and certainly Eugene Sadler Smith, they've done some great work along those lines on how you can further refine your intuition. And Sadler Smith actually has kind of an exercise book on how you can improve your intuition. But to be frank, this community is very large. So in some of my work, I've worked with clairvoyants. I've worked with people who are into mindfulness and meditation. You work with cognitive psychologists. So there are different perspectives on how to further improve one's intuitive awareness. But certainly, even looking at things like meditation. So there's some interesting work that's been done from various communities, and I'm still learning. For me, it's part of kind of a new research stream, and it sounded interesting based on my background. So I'm still learning as I go along. Yeah. I see there is a question from Marta, one of my doctoral students, about is there a difference between intuition and instinct? And I know we're almost out of time. I'll just answer this. So Marta, yeah, and it gets into, we could have a separate discussion, but conscious, unconscious, and subconscious feelings. So there is a difference between those three. So I'm happy to discuss that offline. Are there any other questions or comments? I know I'm trying to keep to the schedule, but I'm happy to answer anything either now or offline. Dorsif Ben-Malik?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for this inspiring presentation. Now, I would like, because I'm really interested in intercultural communication and cultural differences. Now, is there any cultural origin behind or cause or reason behind the difference in intuition style between American or North American and European, or maybe Arab people, etc.? I think it's an interesting research area, basing your research on cultural differences between different cultures in this domain.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I'm looking at Dushan again because we had a dissertation article, a discussion on Tuesday about how a proposal actually defends on how cross-cultural implications play a role. And you're probably familiar with Hofstede and Edgar Schein. A lot of people have done work in this area. Traditionally speaking, and I'm looking also at Fred and Gary and some of my colleagues from the US, the way, so I'm getting close to 65, so I've been in academia almost 40 years. And what I have seen over the years, from the international community, I would posit that you as Europeans are probably prefer more formal methods than we do in the US. Not that, we don't believe in formal methods, but there are certain distinctions and certain propensities, in terms of, the way we look at things. And so it's certainly an area to further explore. And we did notice, I know we have colleagues from Poland. I think Poland became independent in 1989. And again, your historical, what you bring to the table, your historical background and foundation plays a role in how you might think. And so now, for example, Poland, trying to become very entrepreneurial, a lot of small, medium-sized businesses, being developed in, certainly in this period of COVID, there probably have been some aberrations, but, you know, so a lot of it too depends on your historical context. But would be interested, you know, to further explore that.
Thank you.
There are some questions in the chat still.
Okay, let me see. So someone is saying
One
that.
is from Dmitry Biboli, your student.
Oh, Dimitri? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm trying to find it. Dimitri, do you want to just ask me?
Yeah, Jane. Yeah. Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is, has your study identified any circumstances when trusting one's intuition would be a no-no?
Yeah, so what I try to point out, Dimitri, is that, you know, like anything else, there are advantages and limitations. So even from the research, not even my own, but the ones I try to highlight, a number of people sometimes overestimate, you know, their intuition, their gut feeling. Also, when you give negative feedback to people, even though they might be right, that destroys their intuitive awareness. So there are a number of conditions where your intuition can be crippled a bit. So there are ways to kind of safeguard against that, but those are two examples just from the past research from how intuitive awareness could be hampered.